charming performer on stage, and they were screaming.
You like that, eh? You love it, right?
I mean, it was like seeing the Beatles. It's at that point that I stopped making phone calls out, and phone calls started to come in.
After sold-out performances at Yuck Yucks, Jim and Leitris headed to New York City. Tougher crowds, more seasoned comics, but even they could see his talent.
There's a comic, older guy, who went by Uncle Dirty. And Uncle Dirty stood at the back of the club beside me, and he whispered, "He's not Lenny, but he's money."
Buoyed and confident, Jim wanted more. He got himself a new manager and headed west to Los Angeles, his first crack at the big show.
We got in fairly late in the day, LA time.
It would be a crucial visit.
It was about 9 o'clock we went out, something like that, and we decided to walk down Sunset Boulevard towards downtown LA. And we came across Grauman's Man's Chinese Theater. Jim was hopping from star to star and handprint and footprint. I mean, it was just, look who this is, and of course, if he knew them, he'd do the voice. Once we had done this for about 10 or 15 minutes, he turned to me and he said, "I'm going to be here someday." I mean, we're talking about, he's sitting here, you know, we've got Lucille Ball, and I'm going to be here someday, and we're down trying to break into a comedy club. This is a big jump. And there was a movie theater down there, and sure enough, On Golden Pond this was the premiere of On Golden Pond. As soon as the movie began, he's starting to work on the voices. Henry Fonda is speaking and Jim is starting. And I'm going, well, this went on for the entire 2 hours of the movie. Movie ends. Great, exhausted. Got to be 1 or 2, and we've been flying all day and whatnot from Toronto, and let's go. No. We've got to see this again. Second time through, he knows what the scenes are. He's even memorized some of the lines. Now he's doing it in sync with them. And he's got it.
You want me to pick strawberries?
He does it all the way back up Sunset Boulevard as we're walking. He's now running the scenes down and doing both parts.
It's very simple, no man. You just bend over and pick them.
Bend over? Where are they?
He continued on in the hotel room. He was still going the next morning. I mean, I woke up with either Jack Nicholson or Henry Fonda or Katharine Hepburn at the foot of my bed going full tilt. I mean, living with him for 3 days in a hotel room was sort of like having most of Hollywood in the room with you. It just never quit.
Looking for strawberries.
The Golden Pond Act would pay off. And at 19, Jim Carrey had all but left Canada for good.
You could become a major strawberry picker.
Later, man. You just gotta get into it. There's just a feeling.
Hollywood, 1982. The launching pad for comedians was here on the Sunset Strip. If you wanted to score big in TV or the movies, you had to show your stuff here at the Comedy Store. To do that, Carrey chose yet another new manager, someone who could hustle up a full house.
My job was to be on the phone day and night, calling up everybody. I had tons of lists and calling them all up and just bug them to death until they came down there.
Hollis' pestering worked. Dozens of agents, producers, and casting directors packed the club to catch Jim's impressions. Among them, was one of Hollywood's hottest TV producers.
At the end of this evening, he goes into this on Golden Pond thing, which is not only funny, but it is touching, and it is acting. You could clearly see that this guy was an actor.
Alan Burns had a string of hit shows, including The Mary Tyler Moore Show, Rhoda, and Lou Grant. Burns had the golden touch. His shows had won every award possible, and he was looking for a star for his new series, The Duck Factory. This looked like a huge break for Jim Carrey. Wanting to share his newfound success, Jim moved his parents down from Canada to Los Angeles.
When I used to hang out with Rodney Dangerfield, I used to work with Rodney Dangerfield, I'd invite my father backstage, and Rodney and him were like thick as thieves. Rodney loved my father because he was like a vaudeville guy. He's just like constant jokes, one-liners and stuff, and they would get into it. It was like tag team comedy. It was crazy.
I thought it was very kind of dear of him that he was kind of proud of them, and he'd bring them around, and here's my dad, and make sure they were okay. I thought that was kind of unusual.
Carrey was rushed into the series 2 weeks before shooting started. After one season, Alan Burns got to call every Hollywood player dreads.
I'll tell you why the show's not on the air. It isn't any good. It's not funny. There's nobody in the cast that I like. And I said, wait a minute, after we've got this guy, this hot kid named Jim Carrey. And he said, I don't care who he is, he's not funny.
Do you wish you'd had the time to rewrite this guy?
Had I had a little more time and a little more exposure to Jim, that character would have been different. And maybe that show would have gone on for longer than it did and might have killed his career entirely.
Jim's first TV series tanked, a high-profile affair with Linda Ronstadt ended, and his first starring movie role in Once Bitten went nowhere. Jim Carrey was out of luck and out of money. He sent Mom and Dad home. Neither would return. After a big high at the beginning of the year, it all crashes and he sends his parents home. What kind of a state was he in?
Well, that was at the point when Jim sent them back where he was going through therapy, where he was re-examining what he wanted to do with his life. It affected him mentally, no question about that. I think it would affect anybody.
At the age of 21, Jim Carrey had bombed again. What have you learned about failure and all the things that you've done?
That it's a relative term, you know. There isn't failure unless you accept it, you know. There's been so many times along the way, you know, when I did the Duck Factory and that went away, and where people say, well, you had your shot, yeah, that's it, you know, and the people that make it are the people who just keep going.
Come and join me and a group of terrific entertainers for lots of music and laughter at a big concert in New Orleans.
Licking his wounds, Jim Carrey signed up for a CBC special with Canada's most famous impersonator. Working with Rich Little gave him a glimpse of what he could become.
And then he went to Las Vegas with Rich Little, and he realized that, in fact, he didn't want to wind up being Rich Little. He didn't want to wind up being in Las Vegas. And Cary Grant was in the audience when Rich Little was doing his act, and Rich Little went over and did shtick at Cary Grant's table. And in that moment, Jim Carrey suddenly thought, you know, I don't want to be Rich Little, I want to be Cary Grant. And that really changed his whole approach to his career. He was ready to dump his impressionist act and go in a new direction.
Jim went back to L.A. and back on stage. But this time, he wouldn't be hiding behind any famous faces. It was a huge gamble.
He certainly was a guy that when he went on, everyone would go into the back of the room. You know, the walls would be lined with comedians to see what Jim would do tonight. So I think everybody rooted him on. Nobody was saying, oh, God, I wish he would do more impressions.
Jim was fearless, defying the basic laws of stand-up comedy. Make them laugh and stick with what works. Some nights, it wasn't pretty.
Get out. Think I'm kidding you?
Get out! Get out!
I don't think you can actually do something interesting unless you're booed off the stage, unless you feel that. I used to go to the Comedy Store some nights and go, okay, now this is, I have to not be accepted tonight as my job, to not be liked, to not be accepted. And so I'd go up in front of the audience and start, you know, saying painful things and...
To the audience?
Yeah, sure, and then I'd start a fight.
And then if he was bombing, he would do this thing where he would pretend to be calling his wife, and he would call his wife as if he was doing great, but crying, and go, "We don't have to worry anymore, honey. Don't have to worry about making ends meet. Daddy's doing great." And he would always do that right when the crowd hated him the most.
Go. Go. Sometimes we heckle each other. When we knew, you know, okay, he's being really safe now. So they start to heckle from the back of the club. And one night, in the middle of my act, Sam Kinison threw a chair over my head.
Jim's inspiration and close friend was a comic fire breather, Sam Kinison. Carrey's relationship to Kinison led to a lot of late-night mayhem. They'd close down the Comedy Store at 2 a.m. and hit the Sunset Strip. Sam Kinison tore away a lot of Jim Carrey's restraint.
I watched a hell of a lot of comedians come up from the time I started in comedy clubs, and Sam was, you know, one of the first ones I sat back and went, man, this guy is really doing something different, you know, he's really challenging people, you know, and I saw him night after night at 2 in the morning, you know, chase half the audience out of the Comedy Store, you know, and I said, you know, if you can be willing to do that, then you're going to do something different with your art, you know, and so I've been chasing people out ever since.
After 2 years of wild experiments, Carrey was no closer to stardom. He married Comedy Store waitress Melissa Womer. They had a daughter, Jane. And then a terrible shock. Sam Kinison was killed in a car accident. Some nights, Jim Carrey took his Nissan up Mulholland Drive. And looking down on Hollywood, the most mythic Carrey story of them all took place. In a dark moment, a leap of faith, Jim Carrey wrote himself a check for $10 million for acting services rendered. On Jim's next trip home to Canada, it was clear the innocence was gone, but the comedy was intact.
He's a nice, naive person who's suddenly thrown into this world of Hollywood sophistication and decadence. You're describing a TV character. Does that describe you?
Well, I suppose so, yeah, because I'm totally affected and different now. No one even knows me.
What did you do?
I phone my family and they go, what did you become, man?
Did you get into this drug scene down there?
I have some here right now, Paul, if you care to partake. If we could just could we have a mirror and some...
When you first go to L.A., you sort of get swept up in the, Jack and Angelica are here, you know. Jack, hi, how are you?
How are you? It's good to see you, Jim. Welcome to the ranks of the infamous. Looks like we're gonna have ourselves a nuclear holocaust.
You know, it's a crazy world down there, but then, you know, you are who you are, and you sort of, at a certain point, I just got back to, you know, just like doing what I do.
Back in L.A., Jim was about to bounce back again. He beat out 2,000 actors to become the white guy on a hit black TV show, In Living Color. But more importantly, unlike Duck Factory a decade earlier, it let Carrey be Carrey.
In Living Color finally gave him a chance to break loose and show all the different aspects of his talent, including his enormous talent for parody and mimicry and